you, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Five Strikes Tonight here on the Dirty South Soccer Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter channels. My name is Sydney Hunt. I'm an editor and writer at Dirty South Soccer SB Nation, so for all things Atlanta United. Again, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, I'm so delighted to have you with me tonight. Friday, August the 13th, 2021. Yes, the significance of the date is not lost on me at all, but I am not the least bit superstitious, so it's no effect on me that it is Friday the 13th today. But again, glad you can join me tonight. Obviously, a huge weekend in Atlanta United, as of course Gonzalo Pineda is hired as the next head coach of Atlanta United. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about LAFC. Atlanta United play LAFC on Sunday at the Benz. Alicia Rodriguez from SB Nation will be joining me a little later on to talk about LAFC and its season thus far. But, of course, the huge news, as I mentioned, Gonzalo Pineda, the former assistant head coach with the Seattle Sounders since 2017, has been hired as the fourth permanent head coach in Atlanta United history. Joining me to talk about the news that has come down this week are from SB, or not from SB Nation, from MLSsoccer.com, Ari Lilienwall, and from Sounder at Heart and Pulso Sports, Nico Moreno. Gentlemen, good evening. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Sydney.
Absolutely.
Hey, Sydney. Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to get on another Atlanta show. Love the people, love your audience, love the fan base. Every day I fall in love more with those people, man. So I'm just excited to be on and continue to talk about Atlanta.
Yeah, there's been so much going on with Atlanta lately. And, I'm always out there in the discourse no matter what's going on in the league. But I feel like I've been a honorary member of Atlanta United Twitter lately just because there's been so many storylines that you have to comment on.
Indeed. We're glad to have you in the sort of the unofficial Atlanta United Twitter. You're always a welcome guest to that. Nico, I'm going to start with you. And by the way, just for a little context, you were actually on Soccer Down Here with John Nelson, Jason Longshore, and Jared Smith. So another great show that a lot of Atlanta United fans and maybe some Seattle Sounders fans are aware of. So be sure to listen to that every morning. But I want to start with you because you broke the story of Gonzalo Pineda going to Atlanta United. Can you talk about how things came together from what you know, and are you able to share some insights about, the process, how it all came together?
Well, a little bit. As you know, it was a very delicate situation right off the bat. It was Sam's reporting on the fact that Atlanta was asking permission that really started everything from the beginning. So, props to him for getting that out first. And then after that, it was just about keeping an eye on where that news were going to go from there on out. And
Right.
obviously, as somebody who is well connected within the Seattle Sounders, I've been doing this for long enough to have a very long networking of people around me that help my career as a journalist. And I had heard that Pineda's interview had gone very well. And as soon as I heard that, I knew that maybe things were going to go quite quickly. So I started digging around. Initially, it seemed that things were going to perhaps continue or be required for like 2022. That's what it seemed like initially. Getting those early plugs in of information, it seemed like even if Atlanta was high on Gonzalo Alonso, I'm sorry, Gonzalo Pineda, it was going to be more of a future hire. And it was within a couple of days the news really started brewing. And it started really coming apart that it seemed that both Darren Eales and Carlos Bocanegra wanted Gonzalo Pineda to take over as soon as possible, and that Gonzalo Pineda himself, being the competitor and the fantastic coach that he is, he wanted that challenge immediately. So things started brewing quickly. That's where I put out the article through Sounder at Heart. And that's where we are now, right? Immediately after, I think midweek, I ended up putting out that they had come to terms for a 3-year contract. A little before that, things got little after that, things got confirmed. The day before, Brian Spencer had mentioned that Gonzalo Pineda was not in the bench intentionally. It
Right.
was later that we found out that it had to do with him being positive for COVID and not so much about the coaching job. However, I don't know if it helped or not continue to cement this rumor into a reality.
Sure. And there's a little bit of back and forth, of course, between you and Schmetzer the other night regarding the absence of Gonzo from the sideline. But, of course, he revealed the other day that, or was revealed the other day that he, in fact, did test positive for COVID-19 before the match, as he said. Ari, I'm going to go to you and kind of talk about just the culture of the Seattle Sounders. Gonzalo is very complimentary of Brian Schmetzer, his impact on his career throughout the years, throughout his relatively brief coaching career here in MLS. So that just really speaks to the culture of what things are like up in Seattle, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I think this is definitely the right hire for Atlanta is you have a guy who, knows the league really well, which I think there's a lot to be said for that when you're looking at an MLS coach. And kind of seen that in how the last two hires from outside the league have gone with Atlanta is that they had trouble with that adjustment. So I think they had to hire someone who already has that inside knowledge of the league, and then B, not just has the inside knowledge of the league, but is coming from an organization that has a lot of stability and a lot of recent history of success. So I think, if you're Darren Neals or Bocanegra looking at it, you have a guy that knows the ins and outs of the leagues, the travel, the stadiums, all the intricacies of that, which I think is such valuable knowledge when you're looking for an MLS coach. And then I think the other thing about him is he's a young up and coming coach who, you could look at it one way in that he doesn't have any head coaching experience yet. But I almost think that you could look at it like you would a player in terms of there's a lot of unknown upside that you could hope manifests once he takes over the job. So I think just what you said, the culture that is here in Seattle is something that he's been a part of for the last 5 years or so, and then maybe even longer than that, really dating back to his time playing here. And so I think that's something that obviously had to have worked in his favor during the process.
Yeah, for sure. And you wrote a article up on MLSsoccer.com that I have pulled up right now, talking about what Brian Schmetzer's response was to the hiring, and quote saying, I'll quote what he said. Yesterday was a tough day when it really sinks in. It was a long enough runway for us. End quote. He said that we knew that Gonzalo would be gone at some point, that Jimmy Traore was going to be gone at some point. So I want to ask you, why now? Why this opportunity for Gonzalo Pineda where others may have come up for him in the past few years?
Well, I just think it's such an attractive job. I mean, the fan base there is all about the team. The scenes at those games at the Benz that I've watched on TV a bunch of times just look crazy. So it's a major market. It's a flashy market. It's the highest attended team in the league. It's a team that's already won a bunch of trophies in their first couple years. So whatever struggles they've had in the last year or so, it's still up there with the most attractive jobs in the league. And that was something that Schmetzer said today too, was that him and Gonzo talked about it. And they were like, look, if the Atlanta job is offered, you're taking it. Like, you would be crazy not to take it. You are 100% taking that job. So I don't think there was ever a question really in Gonzo's mind that if he was the guy that they wanted, that he was going to jump all over the opportunity just because of all those factors that I mentioned.
Sure. Then, as he wrote, he interviewed, of course, for the DC United job that eventually went to Hernán Losada, and DC, of course, had a really good season. Just kind of as a side note, Nick, I want to get back to you. love to hear your thoughts on that, kind of touching on, what I was just talking to Ari about, just kind of the culture around Seattle, just the stability. That's something that really Darren Eales and Carlos Bocanegra kind of went out of their way to talk about, right? You look at Martino was here 2 years, DeBoer was here 2 years, Heinze was here less than a year, less than half a season. So it really sounded like Atlanta United went out of its way to talk about the stability. Not only that, but the knowledge that Pineda already has of MLS.
It's a new approach, and it's one, or at least for them, it's a new approach for them. And I'm glad that they looked around the league and saw that coaches that have experience within the league are being successful right now. You look at Bruce Arenas, Caleb Porter, Peter Vermees. I mean, these are coaches that understand and know the league. Even Giovanni Savaresi, to a certain extent, because he was very familiar within the league, within U.S. soccer in general. So thinking of that, I think that they finally decided that we don't need this big head coach with all this fancy English clubs that he had managed in the past or anything like that. They just went for what was necessary, and is somebody that is going to give you structure. No better structure than the Seattle Sounders. Where else could you find someone who has soaked in everything he's learned from one of the most successful franchises in MLS? So I think it's a great point of view from their end. I think that something that they did look at is his ability to help develop young players and affect them, influence them in a good way. We saw Christian Roldan today talk about how he just got chills talking about Gonzalo Pineda because of how influential he's been in his career. He's the one who taught him in one way or another the importance of film study, and he would help him, guide him on where to be, exactly when to push, when to hold. I mean, those are all things that came from him. So when you have a talented young midfielder like Sosa in Atlanta, you immediately make that correlation that, wow, he's going to get impacted positively. So there are so many attributes that Gonzalo Pineda brings to the table that is a no-brainer. Aside from the fact that he has not been a coach, he doesn't have that experience, everything, he checks every other box because he is a player coach. He was a player here. He had that passion for the game. He is directing training here on a day-to-day basis from inside the field with the ball in his feet, making sure that he's yelling, he's getting these guys pumped up. So it's a different dynamic that Atlanta has never had, and one which I think the South American players will respond to, the young players will respond to, as well as everyone else, because there is a certain importance of him being fully bilingual. As you saw throughout his press conference, his English is excellent. So he's going to be able to really come into just about everybody in the locker room and provide them with the best guidance and the best way to play soccer. So I think it's a huge hire. It is a great it's a great job by them from finally getting a coach with his type of attributes, for sure.
Yeah, you brought up point about Pineda being a player's coach, and it seemed like that's something that he learned really from Schmetzer. That's kind of counter to the style that Heinze brought in. Heinze was kind of this hard-nosed, kind of taskmaster kind of guy, and it looks like Atlanta United have kind of turned 180 from that and gone with, again, somebody that knows MLS, has been around MLS for a number of years, knows the intricacies of the roster build-up, roster building, things like that. All right, I want to ask you about tactics, and I'll ask you, Nico, after this, but I want to start with Ari on this. Do you feel that coming to Atlanta United that Gonzalo will be more apt to model his tactics after what Brian Schmetzer runs at Seattle, or do you think that he'll kind of run his own ship and kind of go his own way tactically?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's going to be one of the most interesting things to see, is how much he kind of transfers over what has been done in Seattle and how much he puts his own imprint on it. I mean, I tend to think that he is going to very much put his own style and his own tactics into the team as much as he can. I watched his intro press conference and he talked about that, how he feels like he's his own guy with his own ideas and his own vision, and that he's going to try to impart that. So I fully expect that. Exactly what those tactics are going to look like, I don't really know. I know I've seen a little bit of concern among Atlanta fans of, the expectation with Atlanta is it's like, it's about the results, obviously, and competing for trophies, but it's about being entertaining and playing attacking front foot type soccer in tandem with that. So I think he's definitely going to try and do that. I will also say, insofar as the effect that that his departure is going to have on Seattle, he is considered one of the most important kind of tactical minds that game plans for the team every single week, and that he really is a prominent voice on the staff and within the team in terms of all of that. So I definitely just wouldn't sleep on his overall ability and his acumen when it comes to all that stuff. There's two examples that I can think of off the top of my head. One is the 2019 Western Conference Championship playoff victory that Seattle had over LAFC in LA, which I think was really one of the biggest tactical master classes that I can remember an MLS team putting on in recent memory, for them to get that win in that building against that LAFC team. Gonzo, you can ask Schmetzer or any of the players about it. He was one of the kind of main guys on imparting their game plan for that game that they executed so flawlessly. And then also one of the big storylines here in Seattle was the formation switch they had to the three-back center back formation at the beginning of the year, which is not something that they've ever run in their MLS history. But they kind of looked at their personnel and realized that it might fit a little better. But Schmetzer's also said that Gonzo and Jimmy Traore, too, who also departed, they were kind of really hands-on in establishing that formation and drilling it in the preseason and realizing that it was the best direction to go. And it paid off really well. Like, the team is still near the top of the West, even with all the injuries they've had to guys like Nico Ladero and Stefan Fry. So a lot of that, I think, is actually due to the tactics and the formation switch that Gonzo is one of the ones to kind of spearhead and implement. So you guys are getting a very, very bright tactical mind in that way, for sure.
Nico, did you want to kind of tag on to that?
Since he was a broadcaster for about 6 months, I got the privilege to, one of my favorite anecdotes is that I got to share the booth with him for, I believe, was a pregame show and a halftime show. And the way he broke down the game, he completely overshadowed me, which is obviously obvious, right? But my jaw just dropped the way he just broke it down. Oh, the forward was doing a great job of sprinting back and making sure that they stay in shape. And the center midfielder, he's getting way too far out left. You see that bubble of space right there? That's what they're attacking. I mean, he's been a tactician from day one. So you're getting somebody who is addicted to the game. He's not just a student. He's addicted to it. He's going to be a workhorse day in, day out, plan over plan for every single game. Right. I wouldn't even be surprised if he was already looking into the LAFC game as if he was taking this job right now. I mean, obviously that's not the case, and he's not going to come in for another week, but he's going to be all over. He's already watching S2 games. He said that in the press conference. That's Gonzalo Pineda. That's what you're getting. So in terms of his style of play, I think the most telling thing from his press conference was that he basically said, look, I have my ideas. Yes, I want to play a certain way. Yes, but I'm going to go in here and I'm going to put these guys through exercises that are going to make them uncomfortable. And then I'm going to decide where I'm going to go from there. So he's not just going in with saying, hey, this is how I'm going to play without even assessing his players. He's going to go in there, look, see what they're like. Obviously, he's already doing a little bit of that with video, but he's going to put them through his own exercises and then decide what's the best tactic. In my opinion, you're going to get a lot of what you're seeing with the Sounders here today. because he was influential for this three-man backline change, the ability for them to build out of the back. He's the guy that is with the center backs. This is where you go. He talking to Joao Paulo. This is where you're placed. That's what he does. So I think what you're seeing out of the Seattle Sounders this year, their eliteness in transition, their ability to completely take teams out of balance in the counters, that's Gonzalo Pineda. So I think you're going to see a lot of that, perhaps with a little bit more possession, because he does like possession-based teams. But looking at what the arsenal is in Atlanta, and having guys like, he mentioned Bello during his press conference. I think he likes him, and the center backs you guys have and the midfield you guys have. I think you're going to see another three-man backline over there. Also today was interesting that Jose Martinez said that not a lot's going to change. We'll see about that, but I think it is because Gonzalo's ideas kind of go into what the formation has been for Atlanta. But at the end of the day, he's going to make that assessment when he gets there. But if there's something that's for sure, Sydney, is that he is going to put the best team possible out there. He's going to do some long division. He's going to change the equations, change the factors, going to figure it out, and he's going to put the best team out there. I'm very confident that the first team you'll see out there is going to be very, very competitive on a tactical standpoint, on a effort and transition standpoint. I have a lot of high expectations for Gonzalo.
Yes, interesting breakdown for you both, and I really appreciate that. We'll kind of wrap it up here in a couple of minutes, but I'll say first off, Ari, looks like you have a fan here on Twitter, _Andre@best says, Sounders legend Ari Lillienwall. So sounds like somebody's very familiar with your work up there in the Pacific Northwest. But I kind of want to ask you both about the story about the interview taking place on Arthur Blank's yacht, which shouldn't surprise us, considering the amount of money that Arthur Blank has lying around. But what do you guys think about that? What was your reaction when you heard about that?
I mean, my reaction to that, I mean, you were asking me earlier why take the Atlanta United job at this time. I can't really think of a better microcosm than that of some of the things that make it such an attractive job. Like, imagine you're interviewing for a job that you really want, and the first thing that happens is you get taken on a yacht of that size.
That's never happened to me before.
I can't say it's ever happened to me. So, I mean, from Gonzalo Pineda's perspective, he had to be thinking, damn, all right, like I knew this had a lot of glitz and glamour with it, but this is kind of its own level. But it really does speak to the type of resources and the type of market that we're talking about with this, which is one of the best in the league. So, it's a funny story and a funny anecdote, but I honestly do think that stuff like that is, that's what makes it such an appealing thing from his perspective. It must, like, you can't be put on a yacht like that and have it not kind of be thinking in your head, like, man, I need to work here. Like, that is, I 100% would be on that same page.
Nico, have you ever been on a yacht during the job interview?
Not on a job interview. And we'll leave it at that. I've been in a yacht. It was a good party. But I'm going to be devil's advocate here. I think it's, I don't know, suspicious. It's, I don't know, when you got that much money behind you, it does give you a little bit of pressure. I had heard, or now that things are kind of playing out and, things are coming out. It sounds like he took a private jet and all this stuff to meet up with the owner and or president and all this stuff that's going on behind it. It puts a lot of pressure on Gonzalo, and it's a fun anecdote. But I know that from that moment on, he's like, hey, this means that I got to commit here, and I gotta give results, right? So it's fun, it's interesting, but it also knows that the same way they got Chu on a private jet, they could get another guy in a year in a private jet and put him in a yacht and feed him grapes and beautiful wine, for a new job. So I think you got to think of it that way too. But I'm excited for Gonzalo. I'm still very worried about Atlanta as a whole. I continue to think that the front office still doesn't have a clear way about them, that they don't really have a structure about them. I hope Gonzalo can help that, because I have been unimpressed with Carlos Bocanegra's job and decision making throughout this process, the players that he's brought on, and his inability to make him work, the debacle that has been the interview process and the coaches he's brought on. So look, I'm gonna go ahead and say it right now. Gonzalo is the right man for the job, but if it doesn't work, it's gonna be on the front office, not on Gonzalo.
No, definitely agree on that. Definitely agree on that. And after having, I think I forget who it was. He was talking about Atlanta United really struck gold with his first hiring, but the last couple haven't worked out at all. And Frank de Boer and Gabriel Heinze. So this is number 4, the 4th permanent coach in Atlanta United history. Of course, is Gonzalo Pineda, and as we mentioned, his first match will be against DC United next Saturday at Audi Field. Ari Lilienwald and Nico Moreno, thank you guys so much for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a great night.
Thanks, Sydney. Anytime.
Appreciate it, Sydney. Let's not have this be the last time.
Of course not. Of course not. Definitely will have you guys back on a future episode of Five Stripes Tonight. All right, so Ari Lilienwald and Nico Moreno again. You can follow Ari Lilienwald at Ari Lilienwald on Twitter. And Nico, you can follow him at, let me make sure I have his, I should have this prepared. Yes, El Rolo NW, ELROLO NW on Twitter. He's giving me the okay sign that I got it right. So glad to have those guys on board with me on Five Stripes Tonight. All right, let's switch gears. Of course, it is a match weekend for Atlanta United. They take on LAFC at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, a full capacity match over at the Benz on national television, no less, on ESPN. Joining me to talk about that match is the California reporter or producer for SB Nation. It is Alicia Rodriguez. Alicia, good afternoon. West Coast time, good evening, East Coast time, but thanks for coming on. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you again for coming on. Let's talk about LAFC first off. Their season thus far, really like Atlanta United, has been a disappointment. Can you kind of talk about what some of the pain points for LAFC have been so far this season?
Yeah, it's been a weird season so far. I think the team has never really hit the gear that we expected them to. And there have been moments when some of the top players have been playing pretty well, but it's just not quite clicking. They haven't really tumbled off a cliff, I don't think, quite to the same extent that Atlanta has so far, but you never know. But there's also kind of a sense that, are they going to be stuck in neutral all season and just kind of grind through it? Or are they going to get better? Are they going to get worse? It's just sort of a weird holding pattern. And as a result, it's kind of difficult to project what's to come. Right. There's definitely been some issues as far as the play overall. In particular, they're leading MLS in terms of drop points. I think they're up to somewhere around 17 points dropped. And if they had even half of that, their fortunes would be substantially better. And then at the same time, it seems like they're regressing to the mean pretty hard so far this season in terms of goals scored. In prior seasons, they've been a really free scoring team. And this year, they are not scoring more than 1 or 2 goals in a game. And so it's a lot harder for them to get results because they're a team that's used to scoring a lot. And so they're okay with conceding a couple. But if you have games where you're only scoring 1 and your opponent's scoring 2, then obviously that's not going to work out pretty well. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, I pulled up the standings here. LAFC have scored 24 goals, which is really low for them. But they've conceded 25, so obviously a -1 goal differential. I was reading Kyle Bonagura's post on ESPN about the team, just the club's inability to find, consistency at the striker position since Adama Diamande left the club. I guess moving forward, who do you think fills that role for them?
Well, they just signed a forward from Colombia, Cristian Arango, and he made his debut last week. So he's a TAM signing. I expect that if he's healthy and if he is in any kind of form at all, he'll probably be the guy. But it's early; he's just getting started, and we all know that when you're a new player, especially coming mid-season, it can be difficult to project how you're actually going to perform. But I think the hope is that he can help raise the team's scoring game, help set up chances, facilitate space, that kind of thing, and score some goals, obviously, himself. He was one of the leading scorers in Colombia last year. And he does have a little bit of a European pedigree. He spent some time playing in Portugal. So, hopefully he can hit the ground running pretty quickly. And if they can just kind of unlock things a little bit, it just sort of feels like they're staying in the gears and they just, it's just hard. And it's funny because they're not playing as badly as a lot of teams in MLS, but they're not playing up to the standard that I think we expect from LAFC. So, there's a lot of fan discontent at the moment. We're in kind of an interesting spot right now.
Yeah, Kyle was mentioning this is a club that took Tigres to the limit last year in the CONCACAF Champions League. But again, it's a club that, you talked about it, it's kind of not really been up to the standard that I'm sure LAFC fans expect since the club first hit the field several years ago. One particular move, or two particular moves I want to get your thoughts on is, of course, the trade of Mark Anthony Kaye to the Colorado Rapids. And Mark Anthony, of course, has meant a lot to this club. I mean, that's a player that's, I think, is really hard to replace, not only from a like-for-like standpoint, but from a veteran leadership standpoint, right?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think he offers a lot of the intangibles that you really don't find elsewhere on the roster. He's got a physicality to his game. He's able to play a good two-way game in midfield, and that's, of course, the basis for LAFC's midfield in general. But he's also, like you said, he's a leader. He's somebody who really in the last year emerged to be sort of a voice for social justice around MLS. He was one of the players who stepped up after allegations came out regarding Real Salt Lake's hopefully soon to be former owner, and said that he doesn't want to have someone like that in the league. And I think that statements like that help turn the tide to make changes in that regard. So I think he's been a person who's embraced his platform, but also on the field, I think he's a pretty important player. The issue is that LAFC were kind of hitting kind of a critical point. I think they were hoping that they could sell a midfielder on at this point, and they haven't. And I think they're trying to kind of move things along. They have a couple guys that I think they want to give more time to. And one of those players, Jose Cifuentes, has been playing quite a bit this year, and I think he's ready for a starting role. At the same time, I think Kaye, he became a scapegoat to the fans, and I don't think that the team traded him because of the fans, but I found it to be pretty disheartening to see the fans really pick on Kaye. Every time he made a mistake, they jumped all over him. Yeah. Not everybody, but, a pretty vocal proportion. I just didn't think that was very fair. So I hope the best for him in Colorado. I think he's going to really embrace this opportunity. And I think he's a player who can either become a really, really, really good MLS lifer and, become like one of the legends of this league, or he may have a future in Europe at some point. And I really wouldn't be shocked either way, because I think he's a good player, and I think he's somebody who has a lot to offer whatever team he's on. So LAFC got some money, which it seemed like they needed, but we'll see how they do without Kaye in the long run. I think wouldn't be shocked if there's maybe some second thoughts down the road if things don't really pick up in the next little while here.
Yeah, then another move that I wanted to talk to you about is the trade with New York City FC to get Sebastian Biega, who had a really lengthy career with NYCFC over the past 2.5 years. Really a person who anchored himself into the back line for the Citizens out east. What kind of contributions can he provide to LAFC as they kind of, as you kind of talked about, they look to shore things up defensively.
Yeah, so defense is a really important component here because Eddie Segura, their rock in central defense, went down a couple weeks ago with the torn ACL. So that's a huge, huge loss for the team. Yep. They'd been playing with a three-man central defense or, kind of three-man, five-man back line at times this season. And I think it was starting to work, but I think without Segura in there, I think it becomes a lot tougher to really pull that off. And then on top of that, just the depth as far as experienced options in central defense, it became very, very thin very quickly. So, his injury came right around the time of deadline day, and it kind of felt like because they were going after Arango, a scorer, another position of need, of course. At first, it seemed like they probably won't have time to get a defender, and that's bad. This could really turn out really badly for them, honestly. But they got Ibiega. I think it's a really smart pickup. It's it's exactly the kind of move that they needed to get. They needed to get a guy who is capable of starting, but isn't necessarily going to pitch a fit next season if he's not starting automatically. And he's going to get plenty of games this year for sure, and he'll probably get a good number of games next year too if he's still under contract next year. He's got experience. He's pretty steady, stay at home. He's not going to do anything crazy. So I think this is a smart move, and they didn't have to pay that much for him. So that was probably the best part of all. But I think it's exactly the kind of move that if you have a need like that and you're running out of time, I think there could have been a lot worse options they could have ended up with. So we'll have to see how he looks on the field, of course, but on paper, it looks like a really good move.
64 appearances with NYCFC since 2018, but LAFC, of course, trading with NYCFC to get him in the defense. I want to ask you about what Bob Bradley's messaging has been throughout this last stretch with the team, having gone winless in his last 5, losing to Sporting Kansas City 4-1 and then losing to San Jose 2-1, the two most recent results for them. What's Bob's messaging to the team been during this really tough stretch?
Well, he talked to the press today, and he talked about, needing mental strength. And I think that that's a pretty important thing at this point. It really seems like a lot of their issues right now come down to momentary lapses or, not really having that focus on either side of the ball and in critical moments. And I think that makes sense. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, he's like most coaches, immediately coming out of post game, he's steaming mad when, his team loses, and he's pretty upset. He's a fiery guy, as we all know. And then I think, as he's working with the team in training over the course of the week or in the days leading up to a game, it's a lot more like, we just need to keep working. We need to, keep working at it. We have the right ideas. This has worked before. We just need to keep working and get back at it. So I don't think he's really reinventing the wheel in any regard, but it's more a matter of, just trying to keep find the buttons that are gonna, make the players do what they need to do. And honestly, it's a work in progress right now. But I don't think at this point he's ready to give up. I don't think the team's ready to give up. But again, I looked back. This is the longest winless run that they've had since 2019. 2019, they won the Supporters Shield, so it wasn't all bad that year. But this obviously is not a normal occurrence for the team. So I think they would really like to get a result and kind of, snap that, get out of that funk. But, going across the country, playing early in the day, playing in a tough venue, they've lost pretty badly before in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We'll have to see what happens, but I think his messaging is kind of par for the course, I think, for what you would expect here.
We have to switch gears and talk about the MLS All-Star Game, which will be played at Bank of California Stadium in a couple weeks here. Of course, Vela, Rossi are among the All-Stars for LAFC. Can you kind of talk about your expectations for the game? Because I'm sure that the city's going to be buzzing. Not just LAFC fans, but Galaxy fans as well. But both sides of the city will be buzzing around this event where you're going to have the best of the best in MLS and Liga MX descending on LA.
Yeah, I think it's great to have this particular All-Star game in LA. The Liga MX All-Stars and the MLS All-Stars coming together in Los Angeles. I think that's fantastic. It's a way to really build buzz for the game itself and the occasion. Los Angeles has so many soccer fans, and in particular, so many fans of Mexican descent. Some of those are MLS fans, some of those are fans of Liga MX, and I think it's going to be pretty exciting. I think it's, I hope that this occasion is the kind of game that people are going to be really excited about, and it's going to be a good game. I hope there's not, any brawls or anything like that, but you can see some of the passion, I think, between the leagues, the cultures, and obviously the All-Stars from both countries are going to, from both leagues are going to be from many countries, but I still think that there's going to be a seed of that rivalry driving it a little bit, but I think that's going to be exciting. Obviously, with the Los Angeles tie-in, two of the big All-Stars will be Vela and Chicharito, who of course are Mexicans, so that adds another kind of element, another twist to all of this. But no, I think it's going to be fun, and it's been a very weird year and a half. We were supposed to have this All-Star game last year. They put it off a year, obviously for good reason. We're in kind of a weird moment, but I still think this will be a good reason for people to kind of get out and celebrate soccer culture, through MLS with this occasion. I'm planning to be there, and I look forward to sort of seeing what transpires, and hopefully it'll be a fun time for everybody.
I feel like the MLS All-Stars may feel like they have a little bit of a score to settle, not just due to the events of the League Cup over the past few days, but the events in Champions League. It always seems like, that intensity gets ratcheted up year after year between MLS and Liga MX. So we'll see if MLS can kind of close the gap with its southern rivals. But again, LAFC taking on Atlanta United on Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern kickoff time, I believe, on ESPN. Of course, that's what they say. It might be a little bit later, as you know, with how MLS talks about kickoff times. But that appears to be the kickoff time, 1 p.m. East or Pacific time, I should say, again at ESPN. Alicia Rodriguez from SB Nation joining me tonight. Alicia, thank you again for coming on, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. That's Alicia Rodriguez. Glad to have her on board for this edition of Five Stripes Tonight. A really jam-packed edition of Five Stripes Tonight. I think it's the first time we've had 3 guests on the same show, and it went off without a hitch. So, except for my mic, it turns out my mic volume was a little low. So hopefully we got that resolved. But yeah, really jam-packed show. A lot to talk about, of course, in the Atlanta United world, and I'm glad I could come on tonight and talk about it with you guys here on Five Stars Tonight, even with the Falcons or at Mercedes-Benz Stadium playing a exhibition game. It doesn't count, so you have nothing to worry about. I don't even know the score right now, so. But again, it's just preseason. Nobody cares about preseason. Hey, that is it for me tonight. You can follow me on Twitter at SHWrites, SHWRITES, and that's always for the latest Atlanta United news, analysis, and opinion. This is DirtySouthSoccer.com, SB Nation's home for all things Atlanta United. Back here next Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, as Atlanta United get ready to take on DC United next Saturday. Got a couple of great guests that I'm sure you'll love, but I'll tell you about those a little bit later on social media. Again, my name is Sidney Hunt. Glad to have you along with me. We'll see you next time in another edition of Five Stripes Tonight. So long, everyone.